Professor Whish, to what extent does a per se rule alleviate the burden of proof of the competition authority? Does it apply to every conduct or to hardcore only? Does the competition authority still have to show evidence of agreements in cartels? What about the need to show the effects or the harm to competition flowing from said agreements? Is there a de minimis criterion when it comes to restrictions by object?
Well, I must say that's a lot of questions, um, and I certainly can't answer them all in one sentence. Let's begin at the beginning. You're asking what is a per se rule, and I suppose you're also asking me, do we have per se rules in EU competition law? The first thing I'd like to say is that no, we don't have per se rules. If one looks at Article 101 of the treaty, which deals with anti-competitive agreements, as I'm sure you know, it's in three parts. The first part, Article 101.1, asks whether an agreement has the object or effect of restricting competition. But Article 101.3 is a terribly important provision because it says that if you have an agreement that restricts competition in the sense of Article 101.1, it can nevertheless be defended if it can be shown that it will lead to some economic efficiency. The third part of Article 101 says that if an agreement violates that provision, it's void and unenforceable. So if we go back to 101.1 and 101.3, it's true to say that Article 101.1 talks about agreements that have as their object or effect the restriction of competition. Now, some agreements are characterized by our law as restricting competition by object. If a particular kind of agreement restricts competition by object, then it follows that there is no need to demonstrate that that agreement has the effect of restricting competition because the law has already decided that that type of agreement has the effect of restricting competition, and so it is characterized as restricting competition by object. Now, in a sense, therefore, you could call that a per se rule. It's formalistic, it's legalistic, so we would say that a horizontal price fixing agreement has the object of restricting competition. But to say that that's a per se rule does not have the same meaning as it does under US law. Because under US law, if something violates Section 1 of the Sherman Act on a per se basis, that is the end of the matter. The parties to that agreement are acting illegally. But it's very important to understand that in the EU, even if the agreement has the object of restricting competition, so that in a sense it is per se in violation of Article 101.1, it is still possible for the parties to that agreement to argue under Article 101.3 that that restrictive agreement will lead to economic efficiencies. And so it is actually very misleading to suggest that we have a per se rule under Article 101 because we don't. Any kind of agreement can be defended under Article 101.3, but that's a matter of evidence. And our law is absolutely categorically clear that if the agreement violates 101.1, then the burden of proving that that agreement will lead to economic efficiency rests on the parties to the agreement to show that it satisfies Article 101.3. So that's a very long answer to the first part of your question, but what I'm saying is that actually we don't have per se rules in the EU. Now we could go on to another part of your question. You specifically ask what benefit is there to a competition authority either in having a per se rule, or in EU language, what benefit is there to the competition authority in the fact that some agreements are held to restrict competition by object? Well, I think the answer to that is really very clear, that if I'm the European Commission and there is an allegation that there is a price-fixing agreement or a market-sharing agreement for widgets, the mythical product of all competition law exam questions, it's very difficult for the Commission to prove the existence of the agreement, because these things are normally conducted in secret and evidence is kept to a minimum by the parties. They do not generate lots of written documents about the cartel that can be tracked down by the authority. So the competition authority has a very difficult job in proving the existence of an agreement. The benefit that they derive from the fact that price-fixing agreements are held to be restrictive of competition by object is that if they can prove the existence of the agreement, they do not then have to go on and prove that this price-fixing agreement will have an anti-competitive effect on the market, because the law has decided that price-fixing agreements have their object, the restriction of competition, and so there's no need to do effects analysis. So in that sense, there is a benefit to the competition authority of object analysis, because it foreshortens the inquiry. But then their inquiry is difficult enough already, because it's not easy to prove the existence of the agreement. But at least if they've proved the agreement, they don't then have to go on and prove that price fixing has an anti-competitive effect on competition, because the law says and knows that it does. But we still come back to my earlier point, that those parties to that agreement, if they want to, can try to argue that their agreement leads to economic efficiency in the sense of Article 1013, but then the burden of proof is upon them to adduce the evidence to demonstrate the efficiencies. And to be honest, if you've got a secret price-fixing agreement that's been in place for 15 years to fix prices and share markets, I think they have got an uphill struggle to demonstrate that that sort of conduct is economically efficient. Another thing you ask is whether there's any de minimis criterion when it comes to these kind of agreements, the sort of things that would be per se illegal in the United States, or that are held to be restrictive of competition by object in the European Union. Well, I can give a very simple answer to that because of a recent judgment of the Court of Justice called Expedia against the French Competition Authority, where the Court of Justice has held that any restriction of competition by object, by its very nature, has an appreciable effect on competition, and therefore there's no need to demonstrate the appreciability, because the law has determined that object restrictions have an appreciable effect on competition.